big boy. Yeah. You remember what state it was?
New Mexico.
It was New Mexico, yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, there were some other articles on here. So I'll zoom in on this just a skosh. You'll notice this guy that was a sex offender because he had peed in public. There's New Mexico and the talking deodorizers. If you remember the California folks trying to figure out how they were going to pay for their prisons. And then this other one over here was Delaware and big business. And I think I had given y'all this one within the context of chapter 2. So these are probably more quickies. I wouldn't think that these would turn into short answer questions. The ones that we don't talk as much about, or maybe they just have a specific point or a specific number, for example, they're probably better suited for multiple choices. So kind of keep that thought in mind. And then the last article that was up here was the city manager article. Do y'all remember the city manager article?
Is that the Florida one with the transgender?
Key Largo, Florida, where the guy called a press conference to announce a pending sex change operation. Yeah.
Without telling like the town council.
And they were pissed, if you'll recall on that, and they fired him. And I believe that they did end up getting away with that. I think the guy ended up going and he became city manager in a couple of other places over the course of time, but I don't think that he is at that level of government anymore. But it's just the idea, you know, why did they fire him? Do you remember?
Like that he went far beyond doing that damn conference. I mean that conference.
He went far beyond. Go ahead.
They lost faith in his decision making.
They lost faith in his decision-making ability. So you could argue on the one hand, hey, this is discrimination. They fired him because of this press conference, or maybe the action and him announcing the press conference. However, you could also say, listen, he's representing the city. His decision-making is a big deal. And if, in fact, he's not making responsible decisions for the city, then, in fact, that's an issue. So that's, yes?
So do we only fill out however many points of short answer responses, or more than that?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the exact answer. If you answer too many points, it really gets me mad. But the idea, though, is, and you're going to see this as you take the test, some of these short answer questions are going to have the room to be able to write more than others. And if you really explain an answer, then not only will I give you 5 points, but I might give you 6 points or 7 points or 8 points. So really write your ass off when you take this thing, because the basic idea is that the more that you show me you know, the more that I have the ability to give you credit for. If you only write 3 or 4 sentences and we spend 30 minutes on something, it's not going to work as well. It's not going to work.
But it's
as
not
well.
opinion based.
It's not. And what I'm asking you to do is to give me facts, to give me specifics, to explain both sides of the argument, to be able to explain ultimately who won or what the resolution was, you know, these kinds of things. And like that magic marker article, there's not really a resolution, you know? I mean, nobody really won. It's basically explaining their policy during the hurricane, right to your Social Security, you know, this kind of a thing. But the foul ball, there would be a winner, and she lost. You know, or the city manager, the guy lost, you know, this kind of a thing. So kind of keep that in mind. But it's always important to know both sides. Last couple of articles, and I've got some to add to this chapter 3, but you'll notice that I did add several of them already. And you'll notice up here workers' compensation. Y'all remember that ratchet article?
Yeah, the one dealing with the supposed infidelity. So they took...
The supposed infidelity, yeah. And I had mentioned to you on this that basically, and this was Glass Pro, if you remember, the Glass Pro business, the manager was supposed to have been having an extramarital affair with one of the coworkers there. Wife came in with a baseball bat. They ended up throwing 2 coworkers in a trunk. They had a high-speed chase. The car crashed. They ultimately got out. And then they attempted to sue Glass Pro. Glass Pro wouldn't do anything. They wanted to get workers' compensation. And if you remember, the state of North Carolina did what?
Said no.
They said no. Why?
It wasn't on.
Because it was off.
Off-site.
Official. They weren't injured in official Glass Pro business.
That's what it was. It wasn't official Glass Pro duties. So the basic idea is that can you get workers' comp if you're injured at work? Well, yeah, as long as you're doing official duties. In this instance, they weren't on the grounds. They also were not doing official duties. You could argue that this was a personal matter. And it even said up here that the district attorney said, I don't think that they were having an affair, but ultimately the claim was denied. Go ahead.
Wasn't there also something in the manual that said any charges against them for compensation couldn't be for... There was something in the manual saying that they couldn't. Was there? No? Am I...
I don't remember the manual. It does say state law says that assaults based on personal
Personal
injury
injury, okay, so
issues
state law.
don't suffice
Yeah, okay,
as
state
being a
law.
reason to be able to win. So make sure that you're clear. Yes.
Where are the terms? I have to go over these things.
Okay. I'm going to post the terms, and they're not there yet, but right now they're written down. So I'm going to go over the terms right after you leave, and I'll make sure that they're posted. If you remember the porn police, yeah, we don't even have to go, but you remember the porn police. There was a second article on there, though, that was dealing with giving felons, ex-felons, the right to vote. And make sure that you pay attention to that one. And the trick on that one is not so much whether it should be legal or not, but the effect of it becoming legal. Because you remember, they said it would turn red states
Blue states.
to blue states because a lot more of these ex-felons would actually be liberal or Democratic voters than in fact they would be likely to be Republican ones. So kind of keep that thought in mind. And then of course I'm going to add the articles from today dealing with pay to spray and dealing with, oh gosh, what was the other one?
Prayer.
The prayer in Greece, New York. And the prayer one in Greece, New York has an article that explains what they did, and then it actually has a second article that explains the ruling in the case. And do you remember the three things that the prayer could not do?
Denigrate non-believers.
Denigrate non-believers,
Threaten discrimination.
No.
Oh.
threaten damnation,
That's why I got confused with that word determination and damnation.
and the last one was
Conversion.
preach conversion, yeah, and that's probably going to be kind of a big deal. So Jacqueline Smith, to go back to your original question, when I write the multiple choice questions, what you're going to see on there is some of them are going to be kind of straight definition or straight numbers, and just to kind of hit on some of these to give you an idea, this is actually what I was talking about, some of the terms. So from chapter 1, federalism, this is going to be the big chapter on the exam. A definition of federalism, dual federalism, cooperative federalism. These are all going to be fair game when we get on there. Yes?
We have to write that down.
I will post it on there.
I'm sorry, I mean, on the test, is written, we have to write down what the definitions are?
What I would say on something like this is that these are going to be pretty safe to say they're going to be more multiple choice. The vast bulk of them are going to be multiple choice because many of these we really just kind of quick hit, if you will. We quick hit these. But if you remember, dual federalism is the idea that you've got a federal government and you've got a state government and their functions are largely going to stay separate. If you remember with cooperative federalism, this is basically suggesting that federal and state powers are going to be kind of working together, or they may be exercising the same power. So, cooperative federalism might be more about dealing with things like taxation, because both governments can tax. Do you remember any of the pros and the cons of federalism?
Yeah.
What were the pros and some of the cons?
One of the pros was that, I just remember the con.
Okay, what are the cons?
That you don't know who to blame.
Don't know who to blame, okay.
Okay, the pro was that it's like it tests out stuff in states like Colorado, since they legalize weed, at least they get to test out how that works, and
Okay.
if it works, they implement it in other states.
The positives would be things like laboratories of democracy.
Yeah.
And the basic idea is that states can practice different policies, and when they practice these policies, if they work, they can become national law. If they end up not working, then in fact it only impacts that one state. If you notice up here, training or bench, people start usually in local and state offices, and then progressively they work their ways up to national office. I mean, I was looking at an article today when Tim Kaine was actually the governor of Virginia, and of course he just finished being senator and he wanted to be vice president. So you can kind of see the trajectory on something like that. You notice checks on tyranny, the idea that state governments can actually stand up to some of the things that the federal government is doing. You could argue that maybe a good example of this would be, I hate to say it, but Kim Davis, Kim Davis from Kentucky fighting about the whole idea of the same-sex marriage. In her own way, she's trying to act as a check on the tyranny, you could say, of the federal government because they had imposed that decision. And I'm not saying, Jacqueline Smith, that decision was good or bad. I'm just saying it's the idea that the states would be the ones that would push back against some of the federal policies. You notice up here negatives, confusion. You don't know who to blame. Inefficiency. They waste a hell of a lot of money, and there's a lot of jobs. Maybe they could do more, or at least as much, with a lot fewer people working on the same thing all of the time. So some things to think about there. Do y'all remember what Article 6 was? Because I had mentioned to you that there were two pieces in the Constitution that in fact dealt with Article 6. One big one.
Yeah.
And this was a quick hitter that day. Article 6 is where the Supremacy Clause is. And the Supremacy Clause, if you remember, the basic idea of the Supremacy Clause is that anything that contradicts, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and anything that contradicts it will have to yield to the Constitution. So that's what the Supremacy Clause was. Do y'all remember what the 10th Amendment was? Oliver and Pat got into a really nice discussion about the 10th Amendment, in fact, when they were on the discussion board over the weekend.
Constitutional provisions.
It is a constitutional provision. Do you know what it says? Bless you.
If the federal government doesn't get the power, then the state government gets it.
Pretty much. I'll go ahead and pull this up, and we'll use Wikipedia just because that's half the fun. But it says up here, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or the people. So the 10th Amendment is basically the piece in the Constitution that protects state power the most. If something is specifically given to the federal government, it can use it, and only it. However, if it's not given to the federal government, and there's nothing that says that the states can't do it, then it is automatically assumed that that is a state power. So this is a huge deal for the states. If the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, big deal for the federal government, 10th Amendment dealing with state power is equally big in that direction. A couple of more up here, and just a couple of things to think about. Do y'all remember? Go ahead.
So the terms, we're just supposed to know the one on that list?
Yeah, I'm going to post these. It's just
Really?
like I had done in other classes. I haven't posted them yet, and I was looking at it today, and I thought I had.
You could have said that last week. I spent this whole weekend going over all of them.
I tell you what I'll do. I'll make sure that I write more questions just for you.
No.
No, I'll do that for you, Ashi,
No.
because I don't. Yes,
Since next week,
spring break,
next week is spring break?
Next
So
week
when
is
is our?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Oh, okay, all right, cool, all right. Nah,
We've been reviewing, and you don't even know when the exam date is.
it's Thursday, right?
Yeah, now you know. Yeah,
But
okay.
hold up, so that has nothing to do with the reading thing, right?
The reading thing is just the reading questions. Yeah.
And that's due afterwards.
Yes.
So we have a midterm on Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet.
Okay. Yes.
So the reading, it's not gonna be on the test. on
It's
Thursday?
not. So you're gonna have this is the
Okay.
thing. Let
So
me tell you what I did.
think I have a mindset from last semester.
Yeah, I changed this up, and see, this is the thing. When I give reading sections on the exams, people bomb them. So this time, what I'm doing is I'm just giving separate reading quizzes, and it's basically going to be like a take-home exam. And my thought is, you do this on your own. You'll have a couple, 3 chances to be able to do it. It should be easier that way. And then when you come in that day, I'll be able to have more time for you to be able to write more now. So people do best on the short answers. Now there's going to be more short answer.
Okay, so the articles and just those terms.
Yeah, articles, terms, and links. That's all it is. Is that okay?
That is okay now that I know.
Yeah, that's all it is. That's all it is. So you should be better prepared for the take home, because, I mean, that's going to be 20 points. So basically, like I said, expect about a 90, 85 or 90 point exam, and expect ultimately the other 20 points to come from that reading quiz. So basically, you're looking at about 105 or 110 point total thing. That's what I'm looking at. But these are the terms. Full faith and credit we talked about. Extradition, if you remember, we had talked about the idea that you have to return people that are wanted in other states. And then take a look at McCulloch versus Maryland. Of course, that was a Supremacy Clause case. Supremacy Clause case. And since we're in Maryland, I'm probably going to have to ask you about McCulloch versus Maryland.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't ask about it in North Carolina. Looking at some of the others, and
That
just
was the stuff with the bank, right?
that was the stuff with the bank, yeah. Chapter 2, I had given y'all a number of numbers and stats, and this is, again, going back to the Chapter 2 outline, so this is going to be kind of a big deal. And what I would ask you to do on this, as you get into Chapter 2, and you'll notice this down here, and bear with me as I pull this up, bear with me. You'll notice the very first section of this is really all numbers. about 89,000 approximate governments in the United States, about 19 million state and local workers that ultimately have budgets that exceed $2 trillion. You know, these kinds of things. And then it mentions some percentages in there that I had read off to y'all, so kind of keep a good look at that. Do y'all remember what NIMBY was?
Not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard. And you know, you may actually get kind of a question that's like, okay, you know, what is NIMBY? And give me an example of it. And you figure we've had a series of articles. You could pick any number of articles that would deal with that. And again, NIMBY or not in my backyard, the basic idea is that these are not things that I want going on in my backyard. Think about some of the articles that we've had
So
that would
like,
work there.
one of the example would be the library.
Yeah, that's a really good example. One example would be the library. I don't want, although librarians may beg to differ on this, I do not want people to be able to look at porn in the library.
Straight, we don't want people to be able to do it, but it's hard.
But we're gonna protect their
But
rights.
it's hard to fix without breaking everything else.
Wait, what?
I don't know.
Because
Yeah,
it's
let's just
sensitive,
move
they don't
on.
want
So basically you got NIMBY there, you got the stats. Couple of other things. The one kind of government from Chapter 3 that the Constitution actually guarantees for the states is a Republican form of government. Make sure that you're comfortable with Republican. We talked about straitjacket today. The idea that these constitutions get so wordy and they get so specific that in fact they don't really allow states to govern so much as they straitjacket their ability to be able to do things. And then we talked about the idea of a preamble, I guess it was last week. And the basic idea behind the preamble is the introduction to the Constitution. Now, y'all have two things on here, and let me go ahead and make sure that I hit on these.